Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Around the 412 Fantasy Show. I have an upgrade. Drew is not with us today. He's on the bye week. We miss him dearly. Probably lurking in the chat somewhere. But we got my guy here, Jon-o, who's joining us today. Met him at the Fantasy Football Expo over the summer. I don't think I've stopped laughing since. So, Jon-o, welcome to the show, man. How you doing, bro?
Doing good, man. Doing good, man. Appreciate the invite for sure. Happy to be here, man. Happy to chop it up, man. Show some love, man. Black and gold all day long. When I got the invite, man, there's no way I could say no. So I'm here, man, to get lit tonight, man, and show y'all how we do over here with the fantasy football show and stuff.
Hey,
man.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Jon-o does have his own show, the Fantasy Football Show. His YouTube channel is in the comments of the video or the description of the video on YouTube. So definitely check him out. Give him a follow. Love to talk ball. Yeah, we pretty much cut up the entire Fantasy Football Expo with Nick. They did their show yesterday. They also have a show on Sundays to do kind of like start and sits before the week. So anything that y'all need, great resources there. So very excited to have you here. Drew is not here. So unfortunately, that means that you're going to have a very unprofessional doctor experience today. So we'll get it going. We're going to jump right in and get things started. In full disclosure, I did not update the banner for who's playing this week. So it's going to be a much more chillaxed output on the screen. But you know what? You got two good looking people. Let's dive into the injuries a little bit. And if you're already here and you have questions, let us know, and we can definitely make some stuff happen. So what's happening in the injury world? Not really too much happening in week 11. We do have some interesting impacts that we're going to see. First one, we'll talk about Tyjae Spears. Got a concussion, so he's going to be week to week. They confirmed that he's in the protocol. Doubt that he plays against Houston, so it's looking good for Tony Pollard, at least for the next week. We expect Julius Chestnut to be pulling in there. Jon, do you see anything really happening for like Chestnut? Would he be something that you pick up, or is it just like a, hey, ride Pollard if you got him and just wait for Tyjae Spears? Weird year for him. He was somebody that we thought was going to really take over that backfield. Pollard was a surprise signing, and he's kind of just fallen off a little bit.
Yeah, he started off hot, man. He was somebody that like I didn't have a lot of shares of going into the year, and like he started to look pretty good, and then like some of the same injury concerns kind of started to pop up, dings. All right. As far as Chestnut goes, give me the hot dogs. As far as he goes, man, like I think like we're at a place now, like with week 12, like depending on like your roster construction and what you have going on from the first part of Buymageddon. So I would say he's somebody like I would just keep an eye on. And maybe, Saturday night or Sunday morning, potentially, depending on your league format and how many teams you have in it, it could be somebody you could slide it to a flex that might be able to get you some work or maybe, a give me touchdown or something like that right there. So.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, they kind of had like this well-defined committee going into the season, but we'll see. Speaking of committees, the next set of injuries that we got, the Raiders running back situation really banged up after last week. So it's like the International Hall of Mid. So you have Alexander Madison, aka Alexander Middison. He has an ankle injury, and then Zamir White has a quad injury. They both left the game on Sunday. Status unknown whether or not they're going to be there, but we could see the only remaining active player on the roster, Amir Abdullah. Dylan Labe, he was activated, but he's been a healthy scratch. So do you have any interest in either of those guys if you have to, or is it just like a completely ignore that backfield for now?
I think it's this one right here for me is more about the matchup. They're going against the Broncos this week. And I think like we've obviously seen what they've been able to showcase, holding one of the elite backs, if not the elite back in the NFL down. So like, I think this is just one of those situations for me. Like I'm staying away from this week in particular, but as we look down the road, anything possible.
Facts. I don't think I could do it, but I don't know, like something like a Scott Fishbowl playoffs, if like you're into that. And you get something where it's like maybe carries based. It's like, all right, like maybe I'll take a peek at it, but otherwise probably not. Probably the most fantasy relevant player on the injury report this week was Darnell Mooney, has a hamstring strain. Severity of that unknown. It's sounding like it may not be too big, but he did speak to reporters following the game and said that it didn't seem that serious. I think the biggest impact to anybody, I mean, Drake London, it doesn't really matter. Fortunately, they're going to be on bye this week anyway. But if it is going to be a longer term sort of thing, Kyle Pitts season back on the market. I know a lot of people have been talking about dropping him. Is that something that you think is worth holding on to just until you find out about the Mooney news?
Tight end's been such a wasteland this year for me that like I'm all in, still holding on Kyle Pitts. I actually have been more than a few leagues for sure. To be realistic, man, like if you don't have K Dot and or Travis Kelce or something like that right there, everybody else kind of falls in the same breath. So like I'm all in. I'm still holding strong as one of the presidents of the Kyle Pitts fan club.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. What do you think has like more members, that fan club or like Chargers fan base? It's pretty tough. So a couple more injuries to run through for the year. We got Gabe Davis. He's tore his meniscus, so he's done. He was only on like 20-some% of teams anyway, so I don't think that he was fairly relevant. They didn't clarify if it was going to be like a partial or full repair, but given that the Jaguars are awful and there's just no way that he's going to come back clean. So RIP to him. And then the last one, Jake Ferguson left Monday Night Football with a concussion. So he left in the first half. Luke Shoemaker came in, got 10 targets, 5 receptions, 56 yards. See somebody that you're looking at potentially streaming. I know Cooper Rush doesn't really scream sexiest man of 2024, but you said it, tight end wasteland. Would you put Shoemaker in the lineup at all?
Shoemaker was actually somebody I streamed a little bit earlier this year because I have Ferguson in a couple of leagues, and actually he produced for me, but obviously different circumstance, different situation. At that point, it was Dak Prescott. Now, like you said, we had the 2024 Sexiest Man of the Year, Cooper Rush. So, like, I mean, would I be willing to throw a dart at it? Like, yeah, I'd be willing to throw a dart at it because realistically, tight end ones can range from anywhere from Trey McBride to Taysom Hill to what's the other guy in Kansas City there that plays behind Kelce. I think he
Noah
was like
Gray,
yeah, Noah Gray. Like he was like tight end 5 or tight end 6 like last week. So I'd be willing to take a stab at it, depending on what we got. Evan Ingram's on bye this week, so that might be a place I'll look at as well.
Yeah, it was very surprising just knowing that the matchup for tight ends last week was really solid. It was like, okay, like not that you ever wouldn't consider Kelce to be in a bad matchup. It was just like, all right, like he's really going to eat in this one. And then game happens and it was like, oh, well, never mind. We tried, but cool.
Game happens.
There we go. We now have a ticker. So congratulations. You made it. We're doing big things. It's funny. We do this every week. I've been doing this for 3 years. I continue to surprise myself with how I manage to continuously screw stuff up.
Listen, adrenaline makes you do crazy things, baby.
That and Chipotle,
my brother.
But as you said, by Mageddon, I mean, the ticker barely makes it across the screen before it already finished up. So pretty tough there. A couple of minor injury notes. Brock Purdy, he's got some right shoulder soreness. They said he's day-to-day. Wouldn't worry about him. The other big one that we saw, Mike Evans, it looks like he's going to be back. So that'll be a nice plus if you have him on your bench. And then not really an injury update that's like present, but I thought Nico Collins looked pretty decent in his first game back after the hamstring. So looking good for him if you did have him. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. We do got a couple questions in the chat, looks like here. So let's hit those. If you do have questions that you're thinking about asking, get them in there real quick. So first one we got is from Victor. He's on YouTube. Welcome to the show. Getting a little roster flex here. So we got Josh Allen, Nix, Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs, Rashad White, Jamar Chase, Sutton, Marv. We got Jennings, Hopkins, Kelce. I got offered Malik and Brees for Walker, MBJ, and Hopkins. So, okay. It's going to be interesting. We can definitely talk more about what this Giants new look offense is going to be now that Mr. DeVito is here. But just looking at it, Marv for Malik, I would take Malik. Ken Walker and Brees, would think going into the year that it was like, all right, you'd want Brees all day, but Ken Walker has been holding it down.
Yes, sir.
And the Jets offense has been extremely dysfunctional. Now, that being said, Brees looked good last week. I don't know if you saw the numbers, but he looked a lot more like himself. I think it's not been outwardly said, but I think that there's a lot of distrust that's happening, or there's a lot of people that are very unsatisfied with Rodgers right now,
Oh,
right? Where it's like they've made comments about like, oh, like the owner wanted to bench him and they told him no, and that's basically why Saleh got fired. They've pretty much said that like, oh, we don't know if he's going to be back next year. There's just all this weird leaking news that's been coming out, so I think they're going to lean on Brees. Hopkins, based on the team that you have, I don't think that he would see the field anyway. So for me, I like the upgrade for Malik. I do think that like Brees for Walker and Hopkins is relatively neutral. I'm also big on Neighbors. So I would say I would accept this trade. John, any dissent amongst the ranks, or would you go with a different approach here on this trade?
No, I think we're on the same page, man. I actually have a roster where actually I have K9 and Brees, and like K9 is like really kind of helped me get past the Brees. But Brees did look good last week, for sure. And I'm definitely a big Malik Neighbors guy as well. I think really like just the interesting part of this trade for me is the receiver piece, right? Like with Harrison Jr. and Hopkins, because Hopkins is obviously starting to he is making himself a presence there with Kansas City, obviously with Mahomes and Marvin Harrison. I think, he's just, to me, he's a little bit of a wild card because you never know like what to expect or what to get. But I do agree, man. I'll ride with you on this one right here with the K9 and Marvin Harrison Jr. side for sure.
It's definitely interesting just looking at like the utilization for the Jets last week. So Braylon Allen, at the beginning of the season, they were really giving him like good run. But he was only on the field for 9 snaps last week, primarily as like a third down receiving back. And then he only ended up having 1 carry. Brees Hall had 16 and then 6 targets, which was tied for second on the team. If I look at Seattle, Ken Walker's dominating touches as well there. The only thing, though, is that he isn't really much used as a receiving threat. They're really looking to get the ball out to their receivers. Marv, I think historically you'll see that rookie receivers tend to do well in the back half of the year. They tend to progress and get better as they get acquainted with the game. He's not lived up to the second round hype that he had in a lot of fantasy leagues. You saw him going a lot second, third, and I think there's a little bit of buyer's remorse there, especially how hot Neighbors started.
Yeah.
But I do think that he's going to do well in this back half of the year. I think that the reset for the Giants is going to do good for Neighbors as well. So I'm really excited to see both of them and how they finish in the back half of the year.
Yeah, like one of the things that was like that was brought up a few weeks ago, man. I was like listening and watching some things, was just like how the Cardinals use Marvin Harrison, man, as far as like they're not putting him like specifically in advantageous situations. It's just like, hey, man, like here you are, like this is it right here, as opposed to some of the other receivers in the league where offensive coordinators may move them around to get them the ball and to try to force feed them. So I think like that's my biggest concern with him. I think as a talent, like there's absolutely no doubt like what he brings to the table, but I just think it's more schematic. So, that's just a take I figured I'd throw out there as well, man.
No, yeah, that's very true. I was trying to look at something. I don't remember what it was, so we'll just skip that. But yeah, Victor, hope for that. That'll help you. So he said he's only really worried about this week because he would have to play Rachaad White. But I would still run with it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So let's get into our next question here. So Mr. Magic, welcome to the show. Full PPR start 7-team league. Purdy, Dobbins, JT, Jamar, Puka, DK, McBride, JSN, Mason, Keenan, Myers. Who should I package up to trade for the playoffs? All right. So essentially, it's the trade deadline was either last week or this week for a lot of leagues. So it's kind of like last chance, last dance. Before we get into it, Jon-o, is there anybody that you have your eye on that's like, all right, like this is the guy, like he's my league winner, like he's going to make it happen?
Oh man, that's a little bit of a toughie, man. But like, there's a couple guys that, man, like I feel confident about. Like, I don't want to like blow the whole show, but our guy, that's one of the guys I feel confident about, and like I'll talk about him later. But I do think DK, I see him on this list, and I still believe in him big time. He's a game changer, for sure. And I think like if you have a chance to get Jamar, man, like, yeah, dude, like that's one. But overall, like my guy that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, that's the guy for me that is the league winner. And I'm biased, but I think this is a safe space, and I can say this. George Pickens is a guy that like I've died on that hill like earlier on in the year, but like I like his situation. I like what he has going on coming down the stretch, and I think like he could help you be a league winner, especially at the receiver spot. Yeah, man.
No, yeah. I think just looking at this roster, the strength definitely lies in the receiver room. So you got Jamar, Puka, DK, JSN, all really solid. Myers is a pretty decent like flex option there too, being the number one target. Well, he's the number two target behind the GOAT tight end all of a sudden, Brock Bowers.
Let's go.
For everything that he lacks in hair, he makes up with his play on the field.
Dude. Talk about it.
Yeah. Shout out to the Balding Kings out there. Am I right?
You know what it is?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's like, how do I parlay one of these receivers into something different? I'm with you. Like, I would want to roll Jamar, Puka, DK probably. I know JSN has been kind of like having this breakout lately, but I think that he also, given the big game that he had last week, holds the most trade value for you because you got to give something to get something.
Guaranteed.
So it's like, I would say if you're going to trade here, Puka, given the injury concerns that he has, could be a good play, but I'm willing to trust it and ride it out since he sat so much of the season. So to me, it's like I'm taking like JSN and I'm trying to improve in the running back room here. Dobbins is like borderline RB2, but it's really going to need to get an end zone. And JT, like he's had a struggle game last week, but he's JT. He gets the ball. He's consistent. So I like that there. Mason and Keenan aren't really doing a lot for me on this roster. I like the idea of Mason as a handcuff, but from what we've seen from McCaffrey coming back, he's not going to get the ball. And San Francisco is not in a place right now where they can afford to not play McCaffrey all the time because they're not even in the playoffs right now.
Yeah. No, they got to play to win.
Yeah, they got to play to win. They were expected to be the 1 seed in this conference, and they're on the outside looking in. So they're really going to be pedal to the metal. Keenan is probably a drop for me, as much as I hate to say. He's one of my favorite players. But offense just isn't doing a lot. So I would say take JSN and see what you can do on the running back front. Maybe you can lock in somebody. I'm going to look at a resource that I use a lot. So there's a guy. He goes on Reddit by Peaked in High School. His name is
is that I Peaked in High School?
Yeah.
I love that, bro. I love that.
Yeah. That's like his username. That's his Twitter handle, all this stuff. It's Alex. It's like Cora or Corza or whatever, but essentially every week he posts like a kind of like a chart that will say, hey, like here's kind of like what you can get from those things. And he puts one for like standard, half PPR, full PPR. So if you're looking at JSN, the tiers of player that he has would be like Chuba Hubbard, Najee Harris. You already have Dobbins. Tony Pollard would be in the mix for that. Brian Robinson. I think all of those guys like would be like a solid kind of like fair net value for you there. So
you mentioned one guy at the end there. You mentioned Brian Robinson, and kind of like just like I kind of jumped to something just to look to see as well, man.
Yeah.
But like maybe Austin Eckler, man. Like he's a guy that's been running hot, man, the last couple of weeks, and all of a sudden it's found like some value. If this is a PPR league, it seems like he's kind of carved out a role there with the Commanders. So like Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, somewhere in that space. Like when you start to talk about JSN, so
yeah, the other one that you could consider. This is going to lead into our next question is that people are kind of nervous about how he's going to come back from the injury. But Isaiah Pacheco could be that third running back for you where it's like he kind of has a suppressed value due to injury. I don't think that the Kareem Hunt role really goes away because of the record that they have, but that could be another piece that's like, hey, like if you have Pacheco, you might need a win now. JSN can give you that win now.
Yeah.
So speaking of Pacheco, Jason, welcome to the show. Are we starting Pacheco this week while he's probably going to be limited? Bye weeks suck. Agree with you there. I said this on Reddit last night. I feel pretty worried about Pacheco, especially early on, because Cleveland. Kansas City does not care about the regular season at this point.
Mm-mm.
They are solely focused on what are they going to do in February. They want to get his legs back under him, but I think they're going to play it slow. So I think that it's going to be very much like a committee-based thing, and then he's really going to hit his stride as they get towards the back half of the season. So I don't think this first week that I feel great about him jumping in. The one thing about Pacheco, though, is the dude is a madman, and I don't know if he'll let you keep him off the field. So,
well, I think there's that, dude. And I think the other element of this too, man, they got Carolina this week. So like what better game and what better game to like ease him back in or like get him back going, right? So like maybe it is something like, 8 touches or so, something like that right there to maybe see like what he does like on the goal line. Yeah, man, like I'm probably not starting him. It's probably more wait and see. And I think obviously there's another back in that game as well that has a very similar approach, like with Jonathan Brooks.
yeah.
But yeah, man, like I'm probably waiting this out. And like if you do have Pacheco and you're in a situation where you're gonna be in the playoffs, like that's a great gift to have coming down the stretch, man.
Yeah. So Carolina's given up 27.1 points per game the last 3 weeks, 2 running backs in full PPR. So if it's really your only option, I think that he's probably going to be at most, if I was to guess, 50-50, but I'm just a dude on the internet that happens to get on YouTube and talk about sports. So I don't know shit for shit. That's literally just a guess. So I would prefer not to, but I would not judge you if you were in that situation that you have to do it.
Just a couple C+ podcasters out here, man, doing that thing.
Hey, C's get degrees, baby. All right. So Mr. Magic back at it with another question. We got the other league. Do I start? So I got to start 2. We got Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs. I'm assuming that's Devonta Smith, and then Tillman. So I live in Cleveland. Yesterday, they said there was going to be a foot of snow. Not happy about it because I'm going to the game tomorrow. Then it switched to be like more rain, wind, whatever. That being said, Steelers defense, pretty nasty. The only thing you have going for you there is that the Steelers typically don't play well the game that they play after playing the Ravens. They also do not do well divisional game into a Thursday night game either. So could be one there. Smith feels like someone that I can't put on the field right now, although I do love the matchup this week. If he's going to have a good game, Philly against the Rams, they're allowing 43.1 points per game in the last 3 weeks, and that was against New England, Miami, Seattle. So not like top of the line receiver action there. Aaron Jones, he's been a little bit banged up, hasn't really been all that impressive to me. Chicago also a plus matchup to running backs. Josh Jacobs feels like the safest play to me. San Francisco's been a neutral matchup, but I think Josh Jacobs is the easy one. Do either of those other 3, do you feel passionate about either one of those, Jon-o?
No, I think you're spot on with Josh Jacobs because that was the first thing that jumped out. Because like Aaron Jones is somebody that's like he hasn't just been able to get through games and like they've been like running him into the ground. So I'd probably say like if you have to start 2, like Josh Jacobs and like Devonta Smith would probably be the 2 that I would go with, just because I feel like Tillman might end up on JPJ Island, and once you go out there, you don't ever leave. So yeah, I'm gonna go Jacobs and Devonta Smith would be the 2 plays for me, man. This is
cool. Yeah, I really do like that matchup against the Rams. They've been very porous against the aerial attack. So yeah, I'll definitely rock with that. Cool. All right, so how do we feel about starting 4 Commanders? Is that too much? So we got Ertz, Commanders D, Commanders kicker. Also got Eckler, but want to see if I should start Pittman or Wan'Dale Robinson instead of Eckler. So great. I love the pickups because Siebert should be back this week. He was one of the top kickers in the game. If we're looking as far as like what that game looks like, Dallas has been horrendous on defense. They've been horrendous on offense. So I think the special teams stat,
I love it.
Rare, but I love it. I love
it.
No
doubt.
Ertz is like to me, but I get it. Dallas has weirdly been strong against tight ends, so I think that I have more reservations on playing him than I do Eckler. As far as like, I would not start Pittman over Eckler. Wan'Dale is interesting for me. So Tampa Bay has been atrocious on defense. We want to talk about Dallas being a bad defense, like Tampa Bay's secondary situation, like horrible. We got Tommy DeVito coming in. Who is his guy? Typically, it's not the starter, the Malik Neighbors. It's usually kind of like the second tier guy.
Yeah.
Wando's very good PPR. Man, I don't know though. I just don't have a lot of confidence in Tommy DeVito. He only threw for it was less than 200 yards, like 6 games, like 8 touchdowns. So it's like you're really just banking on him getting peppered. So I think if it was me, I probably would roll with Eckler still over the two of them just because he's had the hot hand. But Pittman is definitely not a no-go for me. Detroit, they've actually been good all around on defense. So that's just not something that I'm excited about.
I can't even be like controversial and even like argue with you like on this right here. You gotta stop. You gotta stop making so much sense, man. Like no, I agree with you for sure. Like I think like again, everything, man. Dallas has been bad in every aspect, offense, defense. So I do like that for sure. And I just talked about Eckler, who all of a sudden surprisingly has came out of nowhere and has fresh legs,
right.
And it's been getting busy all of a sudden, man. But I think like when you look at like Pittman and Wandell, like you're talking about two guys at the quarterback position that like really haven't been effective passers. So like, yo, man, just ride it out with that Commanders piece, man. Like they got something to play for, right? Although like Dallas, like in spurts has looked okay on defense, but like they just haven't been able to maintain that because they're on the field just too damn much because of what they've not been able to do offensively.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me about the Dallas matchup is just because they've been so bad that it's like, is it just like a Brian Robinson day?
Yeah.
I want to look at like how running backs real quick have been scoring on them in the last couple of weeks.
Actually, I think I got you. Hold on, I got you. Well, the Dallas Cowboys actually have been 7th worst in the NFL in rushing yards. They've given up. This is from week. This is just through week 9 and 10. I don't have 11 on there, but I'll see what we got here as far as that. But even just like in that space, right? And obviously the the Joe Mixon game. So obviously that's gonna bump them up as far as like one of the
because he put up 33. So but what's interesting is that they've only allowed or they've only given one that's 5. So they're averaging about like 4 to 5 targets a game. So looking at this, it looks like primarily you're going to do it through running the ball. I'm actually going to change my answer. I'm going to say Wan'Dale Robinson.
Okay. All right.
Just because it hasn't been dump offs. Like Bijan got 7 receptions, but Mixon only had 2 receptions. It was just, he just gashed him on the ground. So I would say Wan'Dale, just given the matchup through the air. And then, I would be fine with the other 3.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah. So before we jump into some more of these questions, I do want to hit some different things just because we've kind of talked about them a little bit, just so that we're kind of staying relevant to what we got going on. But let's hit some fantasy football headlines. We talked about him a little bit, but it's the end of the Daniel Jones era. The greatest finesse maybe in the history of sports. The man somehow got the starting job at Duke, somehow goes top 5, top 6, whatever he was, gets $100 million contract, and I think his career high in touchdowns is under 20.
Bruh.
So it's like, what do you think this does for the Giants offense? They don't have a lot. They've had flashes of things. We've seen Tyrone Tracy emerge a little bit. We've seen Malik Neighbors start the season extraordinarily hot. But do you feel more confident, less confident? Like, do you see this as a lateral move? How are you feeling about him?
I think it's a lateral move or lower for the Giants, just because I think, like you talked about Tyrone Tracy, right? Like some of those games happened. One of them happened against our guys, but like some of the other games happened against subpar defenses, right? So I think like sometimes like when that gets mixed into the equation, sometimes we start to be like, oh my gosh, like this is it. And then 2, like you said, man, like I think like the Giants are just in a place where like they're going to be, I don't want to be dramatic, but I'm always dramatic, but Shador, like, I think that's got to be a thing, right? Like, that's got to be like I know it's spicy. It's a spicy take. So I'm going to go ahead and start to cook. So I think like you have that, right? Like, so I think that's that's a possibility for the Giants, like as we look forward for them. But like it's not anything that's like, oh my God, like this is the move that's actually going to help them. I think they're at a place where now, like, you got to see what you got, because like with Daniel Jones, like he just hasn't been getting it done. He's not gonna get it done, and like you said, it might be one of the ultimate finesse moves ever. Like, they have an established star with Malik Neighbors. They invested a lot in this defense, and like the defense has been pesky. For sure, but it's just offensively, like they can't put up any points. Like they can't compete on the offensive side of the ball. So that's what's been hamstringing them, is that right there. But yeah, man, like I think like it's Shador Sanders season now.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they have to go after it. I mean, but they're also the kind of team that would like go out and then like draft a running back like in the first round or like something crazy.
Oh
like,
my God, dude. Oh my God.
So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I feel pretty similar to you. I don't think it's going to dramatically improve the offense. I think DeVito is like a fun story, but I don't think he necessarily instills confidence. I was considering taking him as my only fantasy this week just because he has the best matchup on paper. But I also did that last week with Ricky Pearsall, and he put up a goose egg. So it's like I feel like I need to not.
Yeah, you got to bounce back. You got to bounce back.
Yeah. I've been on a real cold streak, so maybe you can help me.
I'm here to change that, man. I'm here to change that.
I love that. All right, so other headline of the week. There's a question a little bit further in the chat about Bo Nix. Bo Nix really coming on. Career highs across the board against Atlanta. So he had 307 yards, 4 touchdowns. What are you thinking about Bo Nix? He was kind of the forgotten guy come draft season. Oh, like he's not going to do nothing. He was kind of like a fraud at Oregon. That's what everybody's saying. But he's been pound for pound up there with Jaden Daniels as potential rookie of the year candidate. So looking at what he's got left for the rest of the season, you think it continues?
Yeah, I do, man. He's actually somebody that like I put a digital receipt on, like when I first, started like making content and making some shorts. He was somebody that like I actually made a short about. Like, did I know that he was going to be this good? No, I didn't. But like, I also believed in the talent. And that's what I said in my short is I believed in the talent, not the situation. And, he was obviously an Auburn Tiger at one point in time. I'm a diehard UT fan. So seeing him play in the SEC, I'm like, okay, like it wasn't anything that was blowing me away at that point. But I think when he went to Oregon and like learned how to distribute the ball and just playing in a different system and like playing the quarterback position as a quarterback, like he's got sneaky athleticism, but like I am absolutely 1,000,000% not shocked at what he's been doing over the last handful of weeks. So I do believe in him. And not only do I believe in him, but I think the other component of this that like doesn't get highlighted enough, and I've been saying this week over week, is like Sean Payton, like, yeah, like he did our guy dirty, but I'm glad he did our guy dirty. But he's a good coach, bro. Like he's a good coach, and he understands offensively.
Frustrating coach. I hate that man.
Fantasy football wise, absolutely. But like as a real life football coach, schematically X's and O's, like the guy gets it, man. So like I am absolutely not shocked, and I do believe in Bo Nix the rest of the year, man.
Yeah, for sure. So the question that came up in the chat about that for this week, Baker, my dog Bo. It's got to be Bo for me this week. Vegas is a top 3 matchup on paper last 3 weeks for yards given up and just points given up to quarterbacks. Baker's been hot too. He's getting a weapon back. It's interesting to be like, hey, like I'm going to bench a top 5 quarterback this season, but Bo's creeping up there. He's number 7 on the season. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. It's been a really good story. So those were our 2 headlines for the week. Before we jump into Tinder, try to clear out some of these comments. Most importantly, I'm assuming that this is not you, but if you haven't liked the show and stuff,
my dog, man, my bro, man.
Yeah, so accurate. Especially subscribe to the Fantasy Football Show. I always have a good time listening to what you guys are up to. Host Drew Hannes in the chat, Sean Payton of Bozo, big Javonte Williams guy. So I know that you were thrilled last week that he got some run, but it was after they said that they were done with Javonte. So who really knows? I think that's the most frustrating. Like you want to talk about like GOAT of like coach speak, and not like Tomlin. I have like these motivational phrases, but like what I say to the media has no bearing on what I'm actually going to do. Like Sean Payton is like
Sean Payton. He's right, but we should expect that, right? Because in New Orleans, like it was always like this, like dude. Like I can remember, like I'm old enough to remember guys like Pierre Thomas like being in the
Yeah.
mix, and then like you had like the Reggie Bush, and then you had like Mark Ingram, and then you got
Wilson.
dude, like this so like this like you should expect this from Sean Payton. Like this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Like I always say this, just keep it consistent. If you're an asshole, just be an asshole every day of the week. And Sean Payton is an asshole every day of the week.
Facts. We'll get that for sure. All right, so back into the questions. Jose Rodriguez, I need a wide receiver 2 and a flex. I've got CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown in all caps, Mike Evans, Puka, help. So, one of the most interesting developments since their bye week is that the Philadelphia Eagles have been lights out on defense. Quinyon Mitchell has been phenomenal. Locked up Terry. He's locked up pretty much every person that he goes against. Now, he plays the right side of the field. He is not the kind of guy that will move around in coverages and stuff like that. So the reason why I bring this up is that Puka is obviously somebody that's like in the crosshairs of like the danger zone. I have enough faith in McVay that they probably won't just leave him there, but I do expect, I mean, you look at the last 3 weeks, Washington, Dallas, Jacksonville, 13.4 points allowed per game, full PPR. You sneeze in PPR, you can get 13 points sometimes. So it's like that is a concern for me. I think the easiest start out of the bunch is going to be AJ Brown, given the matchup, given the pedigree, and given that he's not coming back from injury. He doesn't have the situation. Out of those 3, and I'm assuming AJ Brown was somebody that you felt pretty good about. Who would be that number 2 guy for you out of this list?
Well, I think we talked about it, right? Like if Mike Evans and his hamstrings are up to par, like you know what you're getting. Like you know what you're getting. And I think that's could potentially be a game environment that could be slept on, like you mentioned. Like the Bucs have been in shootouts every game. No matter how bad the offense is, like they are in shootouts. So like I feel good about AJ Brown. And if Mike Evans is healthy and does play, then give me Mike Evans. If Mike Evans doesn't play, then I think you have to default and you have to go to Puka because, well, the Dallas Cowboys in their situation, like AJ, like you mentioned, like you could sneeze and get 13 points. And I think CeeDee Lamb is at a place where it's like we can no longer expect that from him. I just think that's just a fair piece. But like Puka can get schemed to get open. And like, here's the thing, man. Like for me, like just watching him over the last 2 weeks, like he's looked really spry. And I think like there's no question about it that he's the alpha wide receiver on that team, and Cooper Kupp comes in at a 2. So yeah, that's my take, man, for those two.
I like that. And I think the other thing too is it's like the Giants have done decently well against receivers the last few weeks. It's a slightly negative matchup, but that's the Giants. So they've been a slightly negative matchup. They played Carolina last week, so it's like I don't really count that. Then Washington and Pittsburgh, so it's like Pittsburgh, they only throw to 1 receiver, so it's like I don't know how much I really count that. Washington's kind of much of the same, so it's like that negative matchup doesn't concern me. There's not a lot of competition for targets outside of Otton, so I would agree with that. It sounds like Evans is going to be good to go. And I agree with everything that you said. So very friendly show today. We love to see it.
I know. But we're friendly guys, man. We talked about that before we got on. We're nice guys, man.
Yeah. So we got Pareko from St. Louis. Welcome to the show. Should I trade away Gibbs, Jacobs, and Dell for Saquon, Garrett Wilson, and Amari Cooper? My running backs now are Achane, Gibbs. My flex is Jacobs. So I'm replacing Gibbs with Saquon and flexing Wilson instead of Jacobs.
Woo.
Man, this is a deal. It's tough because it's like I feel like the Gibbs and Saquon side, I feel pretty like you got to give the slight edge to Saquon just for everything that he's doing. But I like the Jacobs and Dell side better than Wilson and Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper hasn't really done a ton in Buffalo. He has the injury, but it's been less than what people I think expected when you go to a team that doesn't really have anything. Josh Allen's really spreading the ball around this year. It's not like it was when he had Diggs. It was like, all right, if you're the Diggs guy, you just get all the passes. Yeah. Garrett Wilson also, with the way that Aaron Rodgers is struggling, it's not really great. I think I would hold here. I like what Tank Dell has done as the wide receiver too. Dalton Schultz doesn't really do anything for me in the tight end room. So Tank Dell had 7 targets the other night. Jacobs has been pretty strong, and Gibbs, I think, is going to have a really good second half. So, like, I like the idea of getting Saquon. If there is a way that you could do like Gibbs and Jacobs for Saquon and Wilson, maybe, I think I could get on board with that. But I think that I would rather have Dell over Amari Cooper. So it's like,
yeah, and I think another element like to throw in there too that like you kind of talked about a little bit earlier on. It's like, man, like we don't know what this is going to look like for the Jets, man, when we get to the playoffs, right? Like we don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know if there's going to be a QB change or anything like that right there. I'm a little bit more optimistic about Amari just because like I think like he can still have those big games. But the other element too that I think like we have to take into consideration, right, is like, to be dramatic, to always be that guy, like you have shitty weather in Buffalo, like you have shitty weather like in New England later on coming down the stretch of the year. So like those are also things to consider when you look at like Tank Dell, who's going to be playing inside of a dome and in like more friendlier environments. Josh Jacobs, if it is bad weather, then like obviously, hey, they're going to feature him a little bit more. I am a Saquon Barkley truther. Like,
and let me just show you this real quick. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good, bro.
This is a follow-up to the question. I honestly don't know if it matters anymore.
Oh, what we got?
My wide receivers are Lamb, Jefferson, and Higgins, by the way. It's a keeper 10-man league, so I'm kind of stacked.
No, man, I'm
Understatement of the century, for one. For 2, given that this is a keeper league, this changes everything.
Yeah.
So to me, this is an easy accept. Because you don't need Garrett Wilson this year. And he becomes like Lamb. If Higgins is healthy, Higgins has been a wide receiver 1 when he's been on the field. I don't think I need to talk about Lamb and Jefferson. So it's like for Garrett Wilson and Amari Cooper to be 4 and 5, incredible. And then you're replacing essentially Saquon with Gibbs, which to me feels like I like Gibbs a lot. He was somebody that I looked at in the back half of first rounds over Saquon at the start of the year. Eating a little bit of crow there on that, but you know, you gotta own it. So and I still feel good about. I mean, the Detroit offense putting up 52 in a professional NFL like game.
Homecoming.
We'll see. Okay. So I would say do that trade, especially if you got that keeper situation. I like that a lot. So IP14, another question for us. So Dobbins or pick someone up from the waiver wire. Let's see. Who do the Chargers have this week? So they're going against Baltimore. Plus matchup for them, pretty neutral. I don't know who you have on waivers, but I don't know if there's going to be anybody that's better than Dobbins. Dobbins is one of the few players. I don't know if the stat still holds true, but when I looked a couple weeks ago, he was the only player on his team that led the team in carries in every game so far.
Wow.
Gus Edwards hasn't really done anything that's sexy for me. And then as Drew, always lurking, he usually says let's practice participation be his guide, but what we haven't considered, J.K. Dobbins revenge game.
Yeah.
So that's a smash for me. That should have been my only fantasy.
I don't know. I think that's going to be an interesting game, man. I think that's going to be. I don't want to get more off the rails, but that's going to be an interesting one.
But I would. They said it's like Rachaad White would be that alternative.
No.
So, but yeah, I would take Dobbins over Rachaad White personally.
Yeah, I say yeah, but
you would think, but
yeah, I was about to say it is because like you have to think that the Ravens. Like I was thinking about this because like I almost went with like a Raven for like my OnlyFans because like you have to think that like they're going to come back out and they are going to be better. They are going to establish the run. So you have 2 coaches that are like looking to establish the run in this game, along with 2 quarterbacks that are like elite. So like I think this is it's gonna. I don't know, man. I think
the Harbaugh Bowl, man, it should be a good game.
Yeah.
I hope they like fist fight on the field.
So do I, man. I don't like either one of them.
Sweet. All right. So Forever Eagles is here last week. Welcome back. Good to see you, my friend. Hope you had a good week. Should I flex George Pickens at Cleveland, Jawan Jennings at Green Bay, or Ladd McConkey versus Baltimore? Man, so you know what's funny is that typically I would just say Pickens, set it and forget it. But the weather in Cleveland, the fact that Cleveland despite what's going on, I will still say that Ward is the best cornerback in the AFC North.
Over JPJ?
In my opinion, yeah. I think
Okay. All right, that's fair.
I think JPJ's too. But I would say for me, Pickens is typically my answer. I don't think with what's going on in Cleveland, like that's not the week for it. Especially on the short week. So you're looking at Jawan Jennings, who had a nice week, but also has a negative matchup, or Ladd McConkey. So I don't know who posted it. It might have been PFF, but Ladd McConkey's been top 5 separator this year. If you look at his route tree from Matt Harmon, absolutely lighting it up. So somebody that you may be wanting to overpay on as like a future player in Dynasty, Ladd McConkey's looking to shape up to really be like that elite receiver. He didn't necessarily have the run last week that we would have hoped, but Baltimore's been pretty porous in the air, so I'm expecting him to have a pretty nice game. I think out of the 3 of those, McConkey would get my start.
All right, so here we go. It's time to get a little controversial now.
Ooh.
Yeah. Just for me, man, like Jawan Jennings, right? And I say that because I think like he's been the best wide receiver for the 49ers when he's been on the field this year.
For sure.
And one of the things like the Green Bay has a tendency to do, like I've been like a big Jordan Love guy like all season and all year long. And yeah, he's had his ups and downs as far as injuries and stuff. But like one of the things that's been, for sure about them is like they're gonna throw the football. So I think like this game, I don't know what the line on it is, but I think this game definitely has like sneaky shootout potential. And Jawan Jennings, right? Like just by default, I think George Kittle said like he might play. They said he might play this week, or he's trending towards playing. Debo hasn't. I think Debo has been like wide receiver 40 or 42 over the last handful of weeks. So like he hasn't necessarily, he hasn't necessarily got it done. So like like I said, like and maybe I'm just being too optimistic, like for the Ravens, but like I just feel like it's going to be a better performance for them after a loss on prime time in the Harbaugh Bowl versus Jawan Jennings in this Green Bay situation, which I think the ball will be up in the air quite a bit.
Gotcha. So pick your favorite podcaster, no pressure. We'll see what happens. But to your point, the over-under for the Packers 49ers, 47.5.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll see. One last comment before we jump into Fantasy Football Tinder. Pareko, he said that kept Lamb last year, can't do it again. Either keep JJ or Saquon. Please keep Justin Jefferson. Please.
Oh no, bro.
He's wide receiver 1.
No, he's wide receiver 1. Like there ain't no doubt about that, right? But I just think like, man, like I'll die on this hill. Like you're seeing Saquon Barkley behind a prime offensive line. And
that line is good. Like, despite them losing Kelsey, I think a lot of people were nervous about that. That line's probably still the best in football.
Yeah, man. And like, like at the heart of hearts, man. And again, I said this during the offseason, at the heart of hearts, the Philadelphia Eagles, they want to run the football. And like Saquon Barkley is just like, I think you're seeing it like right here. Like I even said like, before the season started, like when you think about Saquon with the Eagles, think about Christian McCaffrey when he went to the San Francisco 49ers. It's the same type of impact, man. So that's a great problem to have, bro. Great problem.
Yeah, right. For sure. All right. Well, let's get to swiping. So this is going to be Fantasy Football Tinder. If you haven't been on the show before, or you haven't watched the show before, Fantasy Football Tinder goes a little bit like this. So let's get the little faces so that we can see the people that we're going to talk about. And we'll lead you with a little bit of an example. So a lot of people were asking my co-host Drew Hannes, is he a lock first ballot for the Latits Fantasy Football Hall of Fame, small town Fantasy Football Hall of Fame in Pennsylvania? All ball knowers and watchers of the show knows that Dr. Drew has been a very big staple in the community. So they're going to swipe right. You'll see the green hearts pop up on the screen. For people that are haters, maybe they don't really believe in Drew's degrees and his lab coats, they may swipe left. We don't really admire them too much, but you'll see the red X pop on the screen. So our first person that we're going to talk about, a little bit of a revenge story, if you will. But first guy here, Anthony Richardson. So he got the start last week, immediately propels himself back into a top 5 fantasy performance. Really had one of his best passing days in his career. So, John, my question to you, do you feel like we've gone from rags to Richardson? Are you buying now on Anthony Richardson rest of the season as a fantasy relevant quarterback? Will you put him in a lineup?
I'm going to block him and make sure that like He doesn't ever talk to me. So I'm going to a hard swipe to the left. Because like he crazy and he ain't got no sense and his credit is bad. And when I say his credit is bad, his street credit is bad with me. Like as a UT guy, man, like I've said it before, man, like I never bought into Anthony Richardson. I never was like, oh my God, like the Vols have got to play Anthony Richardson. Oh my God. And then like I think with a small sample size last year, I was like, okay, like maybe I might have been wrong. So I'm gonna tell you even more. He was my Scott Fishbowl quarterback. He was my first round pick. And he's done nothing. So I have the worst Scott Fishbowl team in the history of Scott Fishbowl. So like for me, and I think too, like, you know, I tried to be optimistic about him as a passer, but I don't think like he's taken that step. And then too, like you think about the matchup this week, man, they're playing the Detroit Lions, right? And like the Lions have been kicking the dog piss out of everybody. Yeah. So for me, this is a hard to the left, everything you own in a box to the left.
Beyonce, man. Oh, what a jam. What a callback. We probably played that in my car when you were No, we were listening to a lot of Juicy J, but that's beyond the point. So I disagree with you slightly. So I swiped right on Anthony Richardson, and here's why. I think the biggest change that we saw from the beginning of the season until last week, Anthony Richardson was being molded into this like pocket passer. He got benched, refocused a little bit. Last week, there was 10 design runs for Richardson. If we look at like what that does from like a fantasy perspective for him, that immediately propels him to me into the quarterback one room. You don't have a lot of guys right now that are running the ball or they're doing it too much. Passing around the league is down. So it's like, to me, like if you have a guy that's going to get 10 carries a game, he's somebody that I have confidence in. To your point, for this particular week, Detroit has only allowed one passing touchdown at most per game to every quarterback that they've played against this year. So I don't think he just goes in there and lights it up. Like they've been consistently good against the pass. The two games that they've had that they've allowed like a decent fantasy matchup, they had a rushing touchdown for the quarterback. One was Baker Mayfield. I forget who the other one was. It was somebody super random and not like a player that you would expect. So I don't think that I play him this week. But if they're
Mac Jones, it was Mac Jones.
It was Mac Jones, you're right.
Yeah, Mac Jones.
Yeah. So you're not really getting the production from the quarterback there. Could he break off a big run, something like that? Yes, but I think that I wouldn't want to play him this week. But if he's going to get 10 runs a week, he is somebody that I want on my bench. If he can prove it to me, then he's there. And I do think that he will have fantasy relevance. His schedule is a little bit tough, but 10 runs a game is 10 runs a game. So we'll see what we got. So let's move on to contestant number 2. Taysom Hill. What position does he play? It's football. Last week, Taysom Hill had the game of his life. I don't even know how to explain all of it, but all that to say, he was the tight end, I guess, 1 in fantasy. He had 34.5 points in full PPR. So he had 8 receptions. He had 7 rushing attempts for 138 yards, 3 touchdowns. He threw the ball too. So we've talked a lot about the tight end wasteland. Are you a certified hill raiser? How are you feeling about Taysom? Are you going to keep rolling with him? Or are you going to say, hey, that was a one-time thing and that's that?
Listen. Them filters are making me extra thirsty today, okay, with Taysom. All right, making me extra thirsty today. Like, yo, he was the number 1 fantasy player overall last week. And I think when you look at, at the Saints and just like the position that they're in, right, like they don't really have any wide receivers. Like we're talking about, MVS is like, a waiver wire option. Obviously, we got my boy Kamara from UT. Shout out UT. We got him, but like, those are the players, man. And I think like you're going to continue to see him being used in different aspects of the game, whether it's passing, whether it's red zone, whether it's receiving. So for me, I think like if you can get like that, it's almost like Tim Tebow meets Cordell Stewart almost like with what he's got going on right now, man. Yeah. So like for me, like I said, like the filters are looking good. The jeans are looking good. I'll go ahead and swipe right. I'll be a certified hill raiser.
Hell yeah, man. So I'm with you. Oh, I could have said hell yeah, man. I'm embarrassed. Let's just end the show now. So I'm with you. It's funny, just from that performance, really, he's propelled himself into tight end 12 on the season. He's only a couple points back from breaking into the top 10.
That's wild.
Yeah, so it's like right now in the year he sits at 93.6 points. So like Kyle Pitts is at 6th with 102 points. So he's like less than 10 points away from being a top 6 tight end. Like that's just how tough that it's been. And that's not on a points per game basis. He's even up higher. If you look at points per game, he's 3rd.
That's
it's like, how can you not do it? The other thing that you have to remember too is that right now, based on all the injuries that they have, Olave's out, Rashid Shaheed's done for the year. The only weapon that they really have on this team is Alvin Kamara. So they have to use Hill to move the ball to make things happen. So I would roll the dice. It's like, would I rather get 5 or 6 points from Cole Kmet, or would I take the chance and maybe get a 40 piece from Taysom Hill? Feels like a pretty easy decision to me. So
it ain't just a 40 piece, it's a 40 piece with sauce.
Oh, a lot of sauce. He's got the sauce, he's got the juice. He's doing his thing. All right, so we're going to jump into our last segment of the day. This will kind of be like your last call for alcohol. So if you have any other questions that you want answered by the two gentlemen here, let's get those in the chat. We'll get those answered for you. I know how this goes. It happens every week. We try to close the show, and then everybody and their mother asks their questions then. So let's get them in there, and we're going to switch over to our OnlyFantasy predictions for the week. So what is OnlyFantasy, you may ask? It's completely family friendly sometimes. And essentially, this is your one chance, your one opportunity every week to pick one guy who you think is going to really hold it down for you and have a great fantasy performance. If you would have picked Taysom Hill last week, you'd have been feeling on top of the world. If you were like me last week and you picked Ricky Pearsall, who was out there doing cardio, you're probably not feeling it. So right? So he was wide receiver 104. We don't love it.
Oh, shit, man.
Punt. It was a very lunch pail effort for him. So he had 14 carries, 60 yards, no targets, running back 32. So we're not really feeling that great about the results last week. But we're back in the lab again. Jon-o's got his first crack at the OnlyFantasy. So we'll let you lead off. You kind of hinted at this guy at the start of the show. But who is this guy? You said not only for week 12, but you feel really good about him rest of the season.
Yeah, it's Jahmyr Gibbs, man. He's got a money matchup this week against the Colts. The Colts have been one of the worst defenses in the NFL when it comes to rush defense. And I think like we're starting to like get to the point where defenses are a little bit bogged down, right? Like injuries have obviously happened. And Jahmyr Gibbs, like you can just see how much faster he is on the field than everybody else. And I think like we're getting to that place where like the Detroit Lions want to lock down like the number 1 seed in the NFC. And like they're going to do that by getting their best player the football. And that's Jahmyr Gibbs, man. So like for me, I think, you know, like Dan Campbell, like this guy, he don't care, man. Like he's out there looking for BCS points, man. That's what he's looking for. He's looking for BCS points, right? So like for me, like it's Jahmyr Gibbs, and like I'll keep it real, right? Like I was a little bit like late to the party with him. Like he wasn't somebody that like I was really investing in that second round. I got him in a couple of spots, but like just seeing how he looks, and just I think it was probably about week 8. Like you could start to see that like, okay, like the David Montgomery time is done. Like it's done. Like, all right, now it's time to showcase our best player and like have him run through the tape. So for me, man, it's Jahmyr Gibbs this week in a money matchup. So like if you playing DFS, obviously season long, you're playing them, like give me Jahmyr Gibbs, aka Sonic, and I'll take it, man. So there we go.
Yeah, I like it. It's really interesting watching that offense because I think David Montgomery may be like my favorite running back 2 of all time. He is so consistent and he does like all of the right things. And you're like, wow, like, why is he not like a bell cow? And then Jahmyr Gibbs gets on the field and you're like, oh, okay, I get
it. That's why.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, such like a fun combo. It's so overused, but it's like the thunder and lightning thing, and like it couldn't be more true. And they've done good about, I think, getting Gibbs the ball more, but they've kept him fresh. So I think it'll be really interesting to see like what their utilization, not from like a fantasy perspective, but when they get to the playoffs, like how does that situation unfold? Because I think it's like if they have any kind of like, hey, we want to keep this guy fresh, then it could be even more of a Gibbs show. On the playoff run for them, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll see him in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
So
Pittsburgh and Detroit. And now before you go, man, like now, like I'm absolutely going to be tuning in next week because I want to see like that little graphic next week of
yeah,
me taking Jameer Gibbs. So
hey, we'll see. Because I'm so nice, not that I don't give Drew this opportunity, but we always pick what emojis that we're going to use. So I'll even let you pick your emoji next week. So well, you got to see what happens. I mean, you let the participation be your guide on that one. So
that's fair. All right, I'll let it ride. Let it ride.
Yeah. All right, so my pick for the week, I've kind of been going like, all right, which direction do I want to go with this? So I was like, all right, obviously I can't do any worse than I did last week with a goose egg, unless by like some divine miracle it's like a fumble on the first play and then that's the end of it. So I was like, all right, like what are some matchups that I feel good about? Who's a player that I feel like is primed to kind of like step up? And the name that I kept coming back to was Marvin Harrison Jr. So Marv has been a bit of a disappointment from the perspective of like the fantasy community. He hasn't had more than seven targets since week 3 against Detroit. But he's had a good game before the bye week against the Jets. He went 5 for 5, 54 yards and a touchdown. Seattle, they do have some good players that I really like. Witherspoon, I think, is an absolute dog. I don't know if he can kind of keep the lid on Marv all game, but we'll see what happens. If I'm looking at the stats here, Seattle, they are giving up 43.6 points per game in the last 3 weeks to receivers. They played San Francisco, the Rams, and then Buffalo. So I think given the matchup, given that you could see that Marv has been like visibly unhappy as he has been like not really been a target as much as he has wanted to. I think they have the bye week. They kind of level set. I think they want him to get hot if they're going to have any chance of making it into the playoffs. So I think they lean on him knowing that Seattle's better against the run versus the pass. And then I think that I get to have a better emoji than the cardio man himself. So looking forward to that. We'll see what happens. And yeah, so we'll go from there. But cool. All right. So let's see what we got. So we got another question from Forever Eagles. In my other league, I have Kamara on bye, so I've got Najee at Cleveland to fill in, or should I pick up Javonte Williams on the waiver wire? Both back sharing snaps. I have absolutely no trust in anything that happens in Denver. 2 weeks ago, Javonte didn't see the field. Last week, he led the team in playing time. Jaylen Warren is still banged up. Jaylen Warren also doesn't do well. Like he's good for like a fumble a game in bad weather games, which this is looking to be. So I think Najee against Cleveland. Cleveland actually has been a plus matchup. Let me see. Where are the Browns? Okay, I was reading my own charts backwards. So they've been slightly negative, but overall their defense has been pretty tough. Funny enough, they've been really bad against tight ends. I actually was considering picking Darnell Washington as my only fantasy for this
Now
week.
Washington, baby, that's my guy. Let's go, man. Let's go.
I was like, they tried to throw in that like weird alley-oop thing last week. Maybe they'll get it right this time. But out of those two, I think that Najee provides you a much safer opportunity. Williams, they kind of are riding the hot hand, so that's just not something that I'd want to risk.
Yeah, I think I'll just kind of double down and keep it quick, man. I think obviously Najee provides security. Shout out, man. A little sentimental here. Ooh. Got this jersey when I was in Pittsburgh. So like he provides the safety, but I think like if you were looking Javonte, the only thing that would make me feel okay about playing Javonte is the Raiders played. But overall, I think Najee's playing good football. I think obviously the Steelers are playing good football. It's a bad weather game. This is one of those games I think Tomlin's going to try to stamp and say, hey, bad weather, this is what we're about. This is what we can do is this right here. So, like, of course, I'm going to ride with Najee on this one, man.
Cool. Yeah, totally not a biased Pittsburgh show, but
no.
Things happen.
I'm like, I'm with my people, man. Like, I feel I'm like, this is such a safe space. I don't get criticized for talking about Mount Washington and Najee and GP. Let's go.
It's good stuff for sure. All right. So, as I know in tradition, I'm going to show where you can find us on the internet. We'll figure out where we can find Jon-o on the internet. So get those last minute questions in. If you're wanting to talk some more ball, you have questions about your lineups, anything that's going on, You can find us in a lot of different places. So you can find us on X or Twitter at AT412FF Show. You can find us on YouTube or Twitch at Around the 412. My personal handle is underneath on my name on the screen. You can see that there, JOEFRK. Jon-o, where can we find you, man?
Man, yeah, y'all can find me up on the X. You know what I mean? Johnny Main 37185. You can find me there, and then you can also find me on YouTube as well, man. Like on my own personal page, just trying to get it out the mud. Same thing, JONYMAINE 37185. And then we also have like our channel. Shout out to my boy Nick Wilcox, out there grinding for sure with the Fantasy Football Show. So we got our own channel, so you can find us there as well. But that's where you can find us at, man, for sure. So like, subscribe, man. Like, we got some good content, man. Like, we keep it light, have a good time, man. So looking forward to some subs and some likes, and super appreciative to be on the show today, Joe.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's been a lot of fun. And like I said at the start of the show, all of Jon-o's information is in the description of the YouTube page. I'm pretty sure Twitch does the same thing. So give him a like, a follow, all that good stuff. So haven't got any questions yet. So any closing thoughts as we lead into week 12?
For me, man, it's just more about like, from a fantasy perspective, it's like, yo, man, how do you navigate through Mageddon part 1, man? I know a lot of fantasy leagues are really tight. 1 and 2 games separating from 1 to 9 to 10. I seen somebody today that like from number 1 down to number 11 was like a 2-game separator. Yeah. So like, don't take this week for granted, man. Like, if you haven't been grinding on the waivers and grinding, to add players, like, definitely take that opportunity to do that, because this is actually going to be the week that separates, and you know what I mean? Black and yellow, baby, all day. Yeah,
for sure. No, that's a great point. I think it's funny. I always have said, like, hey, like, if you want to make it to the playoffs, especially knowing that your playoffs are typically going to be weeks 15, 16, 17, you really got to get at least 7 wins in order to be in the conversation. If you really want to be safe, you're going to need 8. Back when it was like a 17-week season, it was like, all right, you got 13 games. If you're above 500, 7-6, you're a lock. If you go 7-7, it's going to be cutting it close, but you really need to start looking at it week by week. If you got to drop somebody that you maybe want to stash, great. But if you don't make it to the playoffs, that stash is worthless. So really take it game by game, really make things happen. And yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of parity in fantasy football this year. Not really a lot of teams that I've seen that have broken away and are like absolutely dominating. So it's been good, but cool. All right. So the people have spoken, and by spoken, I mean, have said absolutely nothing. So we'll let y'all get on with your day. I'd like to say thank you so much for being a part of the show. I think you're the first guest that we've had. I think
Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Nice little bit of trivia there. So we'll have to do that again. We'll have to get Drew in here as well. So only thing that won't be fun is having to redo all the graphics, but easier said than done. Check out the Fantasy Football Show. Definitely a good time with those guys. But yeah, that's going to do it for us this week with the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. I'm Joe Frick. That's Johnny Main hitting it up all the way out up in the Northeast. And we'll catch y'all next week. Best of luck in week 12. And we'll see what we can do.